The discovery in the dark. The cold, silent depths of space stretched endlessly before the auxiliary ship as it approached the forgotten planet. The distant stars blinked like tiny lights, but this world was different. It had been lost to history, to time, and to memory. For millennia, no one had even dared to chart its location. No records existed. It was as if Earth had never existed at all. The Auxiliary Empire, a race of explorers and conquerors, had scoured the galaxies for centuries. They had seen countless worlds, but this one, the one they called the Silent Planet, was different. They did not know what to expect. It was a mystery, a puzzle left behind by time. Captain Rivak, the leader of the exploration team, stared at the planet's surface as they made their descent. His crew had come here to find answers, but they did not know exactly what answers they were searching for. The scanners were useless. The planet was dead. No energy signals, no life signs. Everything was still. It was as if nothing had lived here for eons. The team had arrived on the surface in their sleek black landers, and they began to explore the barren landscape. Dust hung in the air like a thick veil. Nothing grew here, nothing moved. Just rocks, ruins, and the faint whisper of the wind that barely stirred the dead soil. Their first clue came when they found a strange metal structure buried beneath layers of dirt and debris. It was old, but not just old. It felt ancient. The architecture was unlike anything the Xilari had ever seen. The walls were engraved with strange markings, symbols that spoke of a civilization that had once been far beyond their own. As they dug deeper, the team unearthed a series of towering spires, cracked and crumbling from centuries of neglect. The ruins had clearly been untouched for ages, and yet there was something undeniably alive about them. Rivak's eyes narrowed. There was something about this place. The atmosphere was unnerving. Every step seemed to echo louder than the last, and the stillness pressed in around them like a suffocating weight. The air smelled of rust and dust, but there was something else beneath it. Something human. The team began to split up, each of them drawn to different parts of the ruins. Rivak wandered toward a large central chamber, where the remains of an ancient structure stood taller than any of the spires. It was dark, the only light coming from their helmets, and the faint glow of their scanners. As they explored further, they stumbled upon a strange object half buried in the ground. It was a black cube, smooth and featureless, almost as though it had been waiting for them. The Xilari had encountered countless alien artifacts over the years, but this one felt different. It seemed to hum with a quiet energy, almost as if it were alive, or perhaps waiting. Rivak knelt before the cube, his heart racing with excitement. He knew that this was no ordinary find. It was something far more important, far more dangerous. The history of this planet, and possibly the fate of an entire species, lay within it. With careful hands, he reached down and touched the surface of the cube. At that very moment, a high-pitched sound filled the air, a screeching noise that vibrated through their bones. The cube activated. The ground trembled, the air around them pulsed with a strange energy. The Xilari team stepped back in alarm, their weapons raised, but it was too late. The cube began to glow, its surface crackling with an eerie light. Then the message began. A voice echoed through their comms, clear but distorted, as if it were coming from another time, another world. It was in a language no one had ever heard before, but somehow they understood it. This message is for those who survive us. Earth is gone. But if you are hearing this, run. The words were chilling. They were a warning. And they were a message left behind by humanity. A species long gone. The crew stood frozen in place, their minds racing to comprehend what they were hearing. Rivak's mouth went dry. He couldn't believe it. Earth, destroyed. The once great civilization had perished, wiped out by forces unknown, leaving behind nothing but ruins, and this strange message. The voice continued. The humans were not helpless. They had weapons, more powerful than you can imagine. but they did not use them. They left behind this message. If you are hearing this, you will find Earth's last secret. But beware, because not all secrets are meant to be uncovered. Some truths are better left buried. The message cut off abruptly, leaving the team in stunned silence. Rivok's mind raced. Who were these humans? How could they leave such a powerful warning? And why had they left it for someone else to find? It made no sense. The technology was advanced, too advanced for a primitive species. How had they even known that their planet would be destroyed? As Rivok stood there, his fingers trembling, he noticed something that hadn't been there before. A small glowing symbol had appeared on the cube's surface, shining brighter than the rest of the object. It pulsed with a rhythmic beat, like the heartbeat of a dying planet. Rivok reached for the cube again, but before he could touch it, the ground beneath him trembled once more. This time, it was not the quiet hum of the cube. No, this was something far more violent, something alive. The team exchanged nervous glances, their weapons at the ready, but the presence of the cube had already started to change everything. The question echoed in Rivok's mind. What had they just uncovered? The HFY had come to this planet thinking they would find ancient relics, old technology, maybe some forgotten knowledge. But what they had found instead was far more dangerous than anything they could have imagined. As the team backed away from the cube, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Something out there, deep in the ruins, knew they were here, and it was not happy about it. The silence that followed the cube's activation was deafening. It felt as though the very air around the HFY crew had become heavier, more oppressive, and the weight of the message they'd just heard clung to them like a shadow. Captain Rivok stood still for a moment, his hand still hovering over the cube as if waiting for something more to happen. His crew, wide-eyed and trembling, exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what they had just witnessed. The symbols on the cube flickered in and out, casting strange glows that pulsed in a way that almost seemed like a heartbeat. There was an unsettling sense that they had disturbed something ancient, something alive. The crew's senses were on high alert now, their instincts telling them to leave, to flee this place, but curiosity, greed, and the thirst for knowledge held them in place. "We need to move," Rivok muttered, his voice barely audible as he straightened, his gaze locked on the glowing cube. Before anyone could respond, the rumbling began again. This time, it was different. The tremors shook the ground beneath their feet, stronger than before. A crack appeared in the stone floor of the chamber, spreading outward like a web of veins. The entire structure was coming to life, responding to the cube, as if it had been waiting for it all along. "Captain, we need to get out of here," one of the crew members, Jala, shouted, her voice cracking with panic. She stepped back, her eyes darting nervously as the rumbling intensified. But Rivok didn't move. His gaze was fixed on the cube, his mind racing. He knew they were risking everything by staying, but something deep within him told him that the answers they sought were here. The humans, the message, the strange energy, it was all connected. He had to understand it. "Stay calm," Rivok ordered, though his own voice trembled with the uncertainty he felt. "Jala, secure the perimeter. Everyone else, keep your eyes on the structure. Something is happening, and we need to figure out what." Despite his calm words, the tension was thick in the air. The ground continued to shake beneath their feet, and the light from the cube grew brighter, more intense. It wasn't just light, it was power. Pure, raw energy. The air in the chamber grew warmer, and with it, a low hum began to fill their ears. It was as though the planet itself was waking up. The dust and debris that had settled over the centuries began to rise, swirling around them like a mist. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the trembling stopped. Silence again, but not the peaceful kind of silence. It was the kind that pressed against their ears, suffocating in its intensity. "Captain," Jala said, her voice sharp. "Look at this." Rivok turned, his heart pounding. Jala was standing near the edge of the chamber, her eyes wide with disbelief. In the dim light, Revok could see the outline of something large, something ancient, slowly emerging from the ground. It was a massive door, its surface covered in the same strange symbols that had appeared on the cube. It's a doorway, Revok whispered, more to himself than anyone else. The door seemed to be responding to the cube, as if they were unlocking a forgotten passage. The air around them seemed to grow colder as the ancient mechanism groaned and shifted, grinding against centuries of rust. Slowly, agonizingly, the door opened, revealing an inner sanctum, one that had been sealed away for eons. Revok's heart raced. This was no ordinary discovery. What lay behind that door was something far beyond anything they had ever encountered. The hum from the cube grew louder, vibrating through their bones, as they stared into the darkened chamber beyond the doorway. "Are we really doing this?" Jala asked, her voice laced with hesitation. "We don't know what's in there. It could be dangerous." But Revok was already stepping forward, his mind made up. "We didn't come all this way to turn back now," he said firmly. "This is why we're here." One by one, the team followed him, their boots echoing through the vast, empty space as they entered the chamber. It was vast, the walls covered in more of the strange symbols. In the center of the room stood a towering structure, dark and jagged, but there was something alive about it. It was almost as if it had been waiting for them too. As Revok approached the structure, a sudden flash of light blinded him. His crew froze, their eyes wide, but Revok could only watch as the light from the cube seemed to flow directly into the towering form at the center of the room. The symbols on the walls began to glow, brighter and more powerful with each passing second. The structure was awakening, just like the planet. And then they heard it. The voice, the same voice from the message. The humans left behind one secret, one final act to ensure their survival. It is here, within these walls. But the price of knowledge is death. The message was clear. The humans had left behind something dangerous, something terrifying. But it was also clear that no one would be prepared for what came next. The team looked at one another, fear creeping into their hearts. They had come to discover the truth, to understand what had happened to Earth. But now, they were about to learn that some truths should have remained buried. The room seemed to pulse with energy as the structure began to move. Something was coming to life. And whatever it wasn't going to stop. Revok's voice shook as he turned to his crew. "We need to leave. Now." But it was already too late. The chamber's doors slammed shut, trapping them inside. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the chamber. The walls hummed with a deep, resonating sound, as if the entire structure itself were alive. Revok's heart pounded in his chest. The weight of the situation was sinking in. The door had slammed shut, trapping them inside the chamber with whatever terrifying force had been unleashed. "Captain, we need to get out of here," Jala shouted, her voice trembling with panic. She turned to the others, her eyes wide with fear. "There's something wrong. This place, it's not just ancient, it's active. And we're in its way." Revok couldn't afford to show fear. He was the leader, the one who needed to keep his crew calm and focused. But even he could feel the overwhelming sense of dread that permeated the air. Whatever lay within this chamber was not meant to be disturbed. "Stay calm," Revok commanded, though his own voice lacked its usual certainty. He scanned the room, his eyes falling on the glowing structure at the center. It was pulsing with energy, the dark, jagged form now alive with light. The symbols on the walls were no longer just glowing. They were shifting, moving in patterns that seemed to form words, but not in any language Revok or his crew could understand. It was like watching an ancient forgotten code come to life. The hum grew louder. It was no longer just a sound. It was a vibration that reverberated through their very bones. The cube that had triggered everything was now floating in midair, suspended above the floor, glowing with an intense, almost blinding light. "What is it?" One of the crew members, Zoreth, whispered, his eyes wide with disbelief. What have we unleashed? But no one had an answer. They only had the growing sense that they had made a grave mistake. Suddenly, the air shifted. A violent wind swept through the room, though there were no windows or doors open. The temperature dropped, and every crew member instinctively huddled together, their eyes scanning the room for any sign of what was happening. Then the structure at the center of the room began to shift. Slowly, its jagged edges rearranged themselves, moving as though it had a mind of its own. The low hum became a deafening roar as the walls cracked open. Something inside was stirring, and Rivak knew it wasn't good. "What's happening?" Jala gasped, stepping back, her eyes wide with fear. It's waking up." Rivak gritted his teeth and turned back to the structure. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of it all. Whatever this thing was, it was ancient. It was far beyond anything that Xilari had ever encountered, and it was connected to Earth, to the humans. Without warning, the structure erupted with a burst of light, blinding everyone in the room. The crew staggered back, shielding their eyes, but Rivak's gaze was locked on the center of the room. The light dimmed, and there, standing before them, was the last thing he could have imagined. A figure, tall and imposing, cloaked in armor, appeared. It was humanoid, but its features were alien, sharp, cold, and unforgiving. Its eyes were black voids, like holes in the fabric of the universe itself. The figure was silent, its presence more terrifying than anything the crew had ever seen. "This is it," Rivak muttered, his voice barely audible over the rising chaos. "This is what the message meant. The humans, they left us this." The figure spoke, its voice low and resonating, echoing in their minds rather than their ears. "You are not worthy to awaken me." The words sent a chill down Rivak's spine. It wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration. The figure was something ancient, something powerful, and it was now looking directly at them, as though it had been waiting for this moment for centuries. "Get back!" Rivak shouted, pulling his crew away from the figure, but it was already too late. The figure raised its hand, and the air around them seemed to warp. The temperature dropped even further, the walls crackling with energy. The crew felt their muscles tense, their skin prickling with static. Rivak took a step forward, his fear momentarily overridden by his determination to understand. "What are you?" he asked, his voice hoarse. The figure's eyes glowed with an eerie light. "I am the weapon of the humans. I was left to protect their legacy. And now, you have awakened me." A shiver ran down Rivak's spine. The weapon. The terrifying message. Everything was falling into place. The humans had left behind more than just a warning. They had left behind a force, one that was far beyond the Xilari, far beyond anything they had ever known. A force that was now awake and ready to protect Earth's legacy at any cost. Rivak took another step forward, trying to keep the fear from his voice. "We did not come here to destroy Earth's legacy. We only wanted to understand." The figure's head tilted slightly, its black eyes boring into his soul. "You will understand soon enough. But first, you must learn the price of awakening me." The figure raised its other hand, and Rivak felt the air around him compress, as if gravity itself were shifting. His crew staggered, barely able to stand, as the room seemed to grow smaller. The light from the cube intensified, bathing them in a harsh glow. It felt like the structure was alive, and its energy was surging toward them. "This isn't just a weapon," Jala whispered, her voice shaking. "It's Earth's final protector, and it won't let anyone leave until its task is complete." Rivak swallowed hard. He could feel it now. The ancient power, the deadly force, the thing the humans had left behind. And there was nothing they could do to stop it. The air was thick with tension. The figure stood motionless, its black eyes staring down at Rivak and his crew. It felt as if time had slowed, the silence stretching between them, punctuated only by the low hum of the structure. The crew was frozen, unable to move or speak, as if caught in the presence of something far beyond their comprehension. Revok's heart raced. He had always prided himself on his ability to lead, to make decisions in the face of danger. But nothing could have prepared him for this. The thing before him wasn't just an ancient weapon, it was a guardian, a force designed to protect Earth's legacy. But protect it from what? What do you want from us? Revok finally asked, his voice steadier than he felt. His crew stood behind him, their eyes wide with fear, but they were waiting for him to make the next move. This was his responsibility now. The figure's black eyes glowed faintly, a flicker of light passing through them like a distant storm. The air grew colder, and Revok could feel the weight of its presence pressing down on him, like a stone on his chest. "I was not meant to speak," the figure said, its voice like a low whisper that seemed to come from within their minds. "I am the final guardian. I was left behind to ensure that Earth's legacy remains untouched." Revok swallowed hard, his mind racing. "But Earth is gone. We're not here to destroy anything. We just want to understand. Why leave this behind? What is Earth's legacy that you're trying to protect?" The figure's form shifted slightly, though it did not move. It was almost as if it were thinking, processing Revok's words. For a brief moment, the hum of the structure slowed, and the lights dimmed as if the entity before them were reflecting on the question. Earth's legacy is not just a planet. It is a promise that what happened there will never happen again. Revok frowned. "What happened there? What do you mean?" The figure's gaze intensified, and Revok felt a cold rush of air as a sudden image flooded his mind. It wasn't like seeing with his eyes, but more like an ancient memory seeping into his thoughts. In an instant, he saw Earth, lush, vibrant, full of life. But then, in the blink of an eye, everything changed. A flash of bright light, an explosion that seemed to consume the entire planet. The sky darkened, buildings crumbled. The once beautiful world was reduced to ashes. The image vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Revok standing there, stunned. His hands trembled, and he struggled to find his words. What was that?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The figure's voice returned, cold and emotionless. "The humans tried to protect their legacy, but they failed. They created the weapon you see before you, hoping it would be enough. But Earth was destroyed. The weapon was meant to protect the future, to ensure that such a tragedy would never repeat itself. And now, you have awakened it." Revok's mind was reeling. The destruction of Earth, the weapon's purpose, it was all too much to process in one moment. But one thing was certain now. The humans had foreseen the end of their world, and they had left behind this terrifying force to ensure their mistakes would not be repeated. Jala stepped forward, her voice trembling with fear, but filled with determination. "What is it we have to do to fix this? How do we make it stop?" The figure's eyes turned to her, and the air grew colder still. "There is no stopping what has been set in motion. The price of awakening me is irreversible. Now you must face the consequences." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. "Consequences?" Revok repeated. "What consequences? What does that even mean?" The figure remained silent for a moment, then raised its hand slowly. The hum of the room intensified once more, the walls beginning to crack as the temperature dropped further. The structure in the center of the room glowed brighter, its pulsing light growing stronger. "The price is that the destruction of Earth will echo across the galaxy. The legacy of Earth's fall will be a warning. Anyone who threatens the future will be faced with me." Revok's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about protecting Earth's legacy. This was about making sure the destruction of the human race was a reminder to all others. It was a warning, a force that would be unleashed upon anyone who dared threaten the future of the galaxy. A thought struck Revok. What if they couldn't stop the weapon? What if the galaxy would be forced to live in constant fear of the humans' forgotten legacy, always running from the consequences of their actions? "Will we have to fight this thing?" Jala asked, her voice shaking. Rivok closed his eyes for a moment, gathering his thoughts. He had led his crew through many battles. But this was something entirely different. A force of nature, an ancient protector that would not stop until its purpose was fulfilled. He turned back to the figure. If we leave, will it stop? If we don't interfere, will you go back to sleep? The figure's head tilted slightly. You cannot leave. The weapon has been awakened, and the galaxy will know its power. The gravity of the situation was sinking in. There was no turning back now. Whatever consequences had been set in motion by their actions could not be undone. The weapon was awake, and it had no intention of letting them leave without facing its wrath. Rivok's crew was caught in the middle of something far bigger than they had ever imagined. The question was no longer how to leave. It was how to survive. The atmosphere was charged with an unsettling silence. The crew stood frozen, their breath shallow, hearts pounding. The figure in front of them, a force of unimaginable power, still loomed like an immovable shadow. Its presence had shifted from one of curiosity to one of inevitability, as if it was now a harbinger of a future they couldn't escape. The weight of its words echoed in their minds like the tolling of a bell. The weapon has been awakened, and the galaxy will know its power. Rivok felt a deep sense of responsibility as he gazed at the creature. He had led his team through countless dangers in the past, but nothing in his career had prepared him for this moment. The future of the galaxy, it seemed, hung on the precipice of their next move. He clenched his fists, trying to steady his racing thoughts. How could he undo this? Was there even a way out? The crew gathered around him, their faces pale and filled with uncertainty. Jala, the youngest of them, was the first to break the silence. Rivok, we can't just walk away. This thing is too dangerous. We have to stop it, she said, her voice trembling. We didn't come all this way just to let it destroy everything. We need a plan. Rivok nodded, though deep down, he felt the weight of her words. They had traveled across the stars, found the remains of a lost civilization, and uncovered the horrors left behind. And now they were facing something that might be far beyond their control. He turned to the figure. You said that this weapon would protect the future, but it sounds like it's willing to destroy everything to achieve that. Is there no other way? No way to stop it from turning the galaxy into ashes? The figure's eyes glowed brighter in response, the eerie light flickering like a distant storm. The galaxy will never forget Earth's fall. Those who dare threaten the future will face the consequences of humanity's legacy. There is no turning back. It was a cold answer, and it left Rivok with a bitter taste in his mouth. The figure was not just a protector, it was a relentless judge. If the galaxy even thought about challenging the status quo, it would be met with absolute destruction. What if we don't want to be part of this future? Rivok asked, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. What if we don't want to be bound by the mistakes of the humans who came before us? The figure tilted its head slightly, as if considering the question. For a moment, the room felt even colder, the very air heavy with the weight of their words. You are already bound, the figure finally replied. The choice was never yours to make. The moment you woke me, the galaxy's fate was sealed. You can either stand by and watch as the consequences unfold, or you can try to fight. But the price of awakening the legacy of Earth cannot be avoided. You will not be the first to try and fail. Rivok's mind raced. This was it, the moment where all their choices converged. There was no escaping the consequences of what they had done, but they still had a choice to make. They could try to fight back, but what would that even look like? They were facing a force far more powerful than anything they had ever encountered. Rivok looked back at his crew. Their faces reflected the same uncertainty, the same fear. But there was something else there, too, a spark of defiance. They weren't ready to give up. Not yet. We can't just let this happen, Jala said, her voice more firm now, her fear replaced with determination. We need to find a way to fight back. We might not be able to stop it, but we can try. Rivok nodded. He wasn't sure how they could win, but he knew they had to try. They couldn't just turn their backs and allow this ancient force to destroy everything they knew. The galaxy had to be given a chance. "What's the plan?" one of the crew members, Tarek, asked. His eyes were filled with doubt, but there was a glimmer of hope there too. Revok glanced at the weapon, the Guardian, looming in front of them. "We need to find out more. There has to be a way to disable it, to shut it down. We've woken it up. Maybe we can put it back to sleep." Jala stepped forward, her eyes scanning the structure that surrounded them. "But how? It seems like it's built to withstand everything. How can we fight something we don't even understand?" Revok sighed. "I don't know. But we have to find a way. We can't let the galaxy burn because of something that happened thousands of years ago." The crew was silent for a moment, each of them lost in their thoughts. Then Tarek spoke up again, a hint of desperation in his voice. "What if there is no way to stop it? What if we're too late? What if the only thing we can do is survive long enough to warn others?" Revok turned to face him, his eyes burning with resolve. "Then we warn them. We make sure no one else has to suffer the same fate. We fight for that chance." The figure before them seemed to shift again, its form flickering as if reacting to their words. "You will fail," it said simply. "No one can challenge the legacy of Earth. Not even you." Revok didn't respond immediately. He wasn't sure if he believed the figure's words. But one thing was clear. They couldn't just give up now. They had to find a way to fight back. They had to take the first step, no matter how impossible it seemed. "We'll see about that," Revok said quietly, determination growing in his heart. "We'll see." The crew exchanged glances, each of them silently agreeing to stand together. They weren't going to let this ancient force destroy everything they held dear. They would find a way to fight, even if it meant facing the impossible. As Revok took one last look at the glowing figure before him, he knew the path ahead would not be easy. The odds were stacked against them, but they had no choice but to move forward. The battle for the galaxy was just beginning, and they would not go down without a fight.